Initiating moisture.
Here's something the history books won't tell you. The moist meter was what truly defeated the Nazis all those years ago. And now today we'll be looking at Wolfenstein 2, which explores an alternate timeline where the moist meter was never invented and the Nazis won the war. In the game you play as BJ Blazkowicz, who pretty much single-handedly takes on the entire Nazi regime. The other characters that support BJ never actually do anything in the battlefield. They just kind of stay back at home base, eat, sleep, and jerk off. Except BJ's lover, Anya. She's on the front lines constantly, and she's basically a female, pregnant Jason Bourne. An absolute badass. She has 2 twins growing inside her, and she uses that inflated stomach full of 2 human life forms as basically a bulletproof vest. But aside from her, the rest of the cast here, they don't actually contribute on the front lines very much. But the game is fucking fun. It is really well written. All of the characters are likable and they each have really unique personalities that feel alive. And you really start liking the characters and hating the bad guys, and they make the bad guys as over-the-top awful as they possibly could, which isn't really that hard considering they're Nazis, so it's not very difficult to make Nazis extremely hateable. But all the characters were pretty well written, and the main game was well written as well. The story was good, and the game seemed very self-aware. It knew it was over-the-top, and it wanted to relish that fact. It wanted to be as over-the-top as it could possibly be. I will say though, I think some of the cutscenes dragged on. There may have been an overload of them. The game took me 7.5 to 8 hours to complete, and about 5 of those hours were spent watching cutscenes or just listening to dialogue, which isn't bad since it was all well written, but it still leads to a pacing issue where you have this over-the-top, really fun gunplay action segment, testosterone flowing out the asshole, and then you go to a pretty slow cutscene, and then another cutscene, and then another cutscene, and then you're back in the action 30 minutes later. It just kind of makes it feel less awesome. Even though the cutscenes and the writing are great, I think there should have been more actual gameplay and action. And the gameplay is fucking great. That's why I definitely want more of it. The gunplay was fantastic. The game made you feel like this awesome badass. Even the first level does a great job of selling you that you are a fucking badass. You roll around on a wheelchair just eliminating Nazis, annihilating them in a fucking wheelchair like you're Tony Hawk doing stunts down the stairs while firing in all directions. It's just fucking fun to play the game. And another thing that was really great is the levels. The levels did a great job of keeping everything fresh. The setting kept changing and what you were supposed to do in the level kept changing, and it was really nice. 1 minute you're on Earth enjoying a milkshake with a fire extinguisher nuclear bomb. Next second you're on Venus to act in a Nazi propaganda film in front of Adolf Hitler. The game knew how to keep things fresh and interesting so nothing got stale or overstayed its welcome. The game was like a nice fresh loaf of bread that stayed constantly fresh and warm instead of becoming that fucking piece of cardboard the next day. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the soundtrack. The music fit well throughout the entire game, and it just made the game that much cooler with this cum-inducing soundtrack. Now, as for some complaints I have about the game, I think the main hub world where you explore, get side missions and shit, and just talk to the crew was uninspired. It was labyrinthian, and it kind of got difficult to find your way around the ship. Even as you got towards the end of the game, you'd still have a hard time remembering where the ammo depot was, where Max is, where my girl Rosa was at. I needed to feed her potatoes so she got nice and strong, but half the time I couldn't find her. Really, that whole area was just lackluster and underwhelming. I also don't really like how the game ended. This is a game that existed purely to make a sequel. They had that in mind the whole time, but what they failed to realize is that in making a game to set up a sequel, you have to at least give the player some sense of accomplishment. In this game, it doesn't really feel like you accomplished all that much. I obviously think a lot got accomplished and it pushes the story forward quite a bit. But, take for example Halo 2. By the end of Halo 2, you feel like you've made a big impact on the story, even though you know there's going to be a next one. And this game just didn't have that sense of accomplishment, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and pop this into the same machine that took down the Nazis in the first place, the moist meter. I'm giving this an 80%. And I already know there's going to be people in the comments, what? Only an 80%? This man must eat asshole out of his asshole. Going against the grain of the mainstream game reviewers that give this a 9 out of 10. And he only had 2 or 3 main complaints and gives it an 80? He must just be trying to be edgy and cool. Well, troglodyte, just because there's not a whole lot of complaints doesn't mean I think this game is an absolute must-buy divine gift to humanity that deserves a 9 or higher. I think it's a very fun game that I enjoyed greatly, but it's not a game that I feel was groundbreaking or pushed the envelope and everyone in the world should play at some point. but it is a very fun game that people that like a competent FPS would very much enjoy. And I think most people will like the writing in this game. This game has a lot to offer people who enjoy a good single-player experience that's not marred by awful microtransactions, and just like some high testosterone over-the-top action. So yeah, that's it. See ya.